here is the Patterned Colorblock Lettering tutorial we'll be doing together today. It's really quite simple, actually, due to the simple lettering style, my pattern brushes, and just the tools that Procreate has built in. So that's what we'll be making. We're going to use lots of layers, some fun colors, and just for fun, I thought it would be cool to show you what it might look like as a product. So here it is mocked up as a gift tag. You could print these yourself at home and cut them out and put them on your holiday packages. It would be really cute on a holiday mug. So those I just do for fun sometimes just to see how it might look. On the blog, you can grab and download this PDF printable. So I've printed mine here. Not only can you reference it while we're working on the project together, I've listed all the brushes for you. You don't have to have them, but we will be using them. The overwhelming bulk of the brushes are from my Maximalist kit. So if you're just gonna do one, that would be the kit to have. And then the color palette is part of the color palette from one that's already on my blog. So in the blog post, there is a link to download that as a Procreate file. It is the Happy Brights, and we're not using quite all of them, but we're using 6 of them, and actually even 7 because we're using the dark green to do just a wee bit of dimension. And the last thing I wanted to talk to you about before we get started creating is I got a new iPad. You might have seen in my stories. My old iPad Pro was probably 7 years old, and it was just getting really slow and struggling. The touchscreen wasn't working sometimes. So it was time to upgrade. I hemmed and hawed over what kind of iPad to get this time. Mostly, I love the big size, so I knew I wanted an iPad Pro again because I do so much work on it, and I love the big size of my old one. So I did get the 13-inch. Ultimately, I decided to pay extra to do the nano texture glass. 2 reasons. One, it allows you to work outside and not have the glare, but also because I film a lot of video tutorials, it's nice. I've only had it since yesterday. My first impression, though, is that it feels very much like the paper-like screen protective cover that I used on my old iPad. I like the texture a lot. It feels much nicer with the Apple Pencil to write on. And I wouldn't say that a screen protector is even necessary. So for now, I am gonna go without one. The other thing is I got a new Apple Pencil. So I had the normal, I guess like 2nd gen, and now I have the Pro. And I did get it, I don't know if you can see very well on camera, I might have to refocus. I got it engraved this time, which is kind of fun. And then it has haptics built in, so it shakes for certain things. And then other things that are built in, if I squeeze it, see how and you can set what you want to do. So if I squeeze it, I can switch between brush and eraser really simply. And then if I double tap, my color palette pops up. So I've set what I wanted it to do in the options. There's not a ton of options, but there's enough that it is super useful and easy to remember. So I've been playing with those as I work through this project. Other than that, it's not super different. It will kind of hover over things. So if you like hover, it'll play with your video. And then I've noticed if I hover over other things, like you can see that it wants to select that. So here, see that little, can you see that on screen, how it shows the slider before you actually use it? So just some little things like that, but I'm definitely glad I upgraded both. I did reset my old iPad, and it seems to have helped some of the screen issues I was having. And my son is going off to college this fall, so I am going to give the Apple Pencil and iPad to him so he can use it at college. And it is just magnetic to the side to charge, just like my other one was. All right, so I think that's it. Let's go ahead and get started creating this project. So the very first thing you need to do is open a canvas and draw 2 letters on it. We're doing ho, ho, ho for the holidays. All you need to draw is an H and an O to start. If you are not comfortable with lettering or not good with lettering, you can always click the wrench icon and click add text and just type it in and use it that way. I drew it. It's really simple to draw block letters. Yours can look like mine. They can look different. You can do a standard O. Mine's a little like squared, a rounded but squared off shape. So that's all you need. And if you are completely new to Procreate, To start a new canvas, all you do is click this plus size. You can go for any size you want, really. You can use the normal screen size. I am using one of my Instagram 4:5 ratio just so it will fit well on Instagram if I decide to post this. All right, so you've got your canvas open and you've got an H and an O drawn or added through text. So make it so that it fits roughly with room to have 3 of these. So when I go to add more, what I like to do is click my wrench icon, click canvas, click drawing guide, and edit drawing guide. So now I'm gonna move my grid size all the way up to max. You can change your drawing guide colors if you would like. I usually leave mine as they are or make them blue. And then I am going to move this up a little and then I can center it. I'm going to duplicate, click my arrow tool, and now I'm gonna turn on snapping and magnetic so I can keep it nice and in line. So I'm gonna put that one right in the center, and you get those yellow lines when it is perfectly on. See, even though it looks like I'm centered in the middle, I'm not quite. That's only really important if you're doing patterns and you have to play with it to make sure you get both yellow lines. For this project, it doesn't matter so much, so we can go ahead and leave it. And then we are gonna do one more, drag it down, and I'm just gonna eyeball the spacing so that they're about the same. If you wanna make sure it's perfect, all you have to do is pinch those down now into one layer, and then we're pretty good. See, I got both the yellow for just a second there. It can be a little tricky to get it to line up. All right, so I wanted to make my middle O. Initially, I thought I'll do an ornament, and I was like, that's kind of overdone. I've done it myself many times. So I thought, let's make it a fun little gift instead, especially with the shape that I went with for my O. If yours is more rounded, an ornament may make more sense for you. So the first thing I'm gonna do is grab black, and I'm just gonna color in that space. So you can see there's a faint white line. An easy way to fix that is to drag and drop, hold your pencil down, and you can see you have a threshold. So if you increase that threshold up higher, it will fill more. So I ran out of room on my page. So if I started over here, drag and drop, same process, and just increase that threshold so it's higher, I won't get that white line around the edge. All right, so because we are using multi-colored letters plus patterns, we are gonna use a combination of Alpha Lock and clipping mask. I find that that's the easiest way to do that. With so many design programs, there's more than one way. A lot of us tend to get comfortable in our workflow and do something that's maybe the not most efficient way, but it is for you because that's how you do it. So if you think I'm doing it a weird way, it's the same way I do it for every single project. All right, so what I usually like to do at this point is rename this and call it sketch, and then duplicate it. And then I'm gonna turn off my sketch layer just so I always have it. And I'm gonna rename my new layer lettering. All right, so a lot of people prefer clipping masks because they're considered non-destructive. When you use Alpha Lock, you are actually changing the layer. I don't mind that, it doesn't bother me. Some people are nitpicky about it. And like I said, I always have my sketch layer to go back to. So what we're gonna do is start by tapping that top layer and clicking Alpha Lock. And if you look at the layer up here, it is now got this checkerboard pattern behind it. That means that we can only color, so if I grab a color, I can only color on my letters. I cannot color on the background. If I were to turn Alpha Lock off, the color goes everywhere. All right, so it basically turns it into a coloring page of sorts where you're confined to your artwork. So again, I'm gonna click Alpha Lock, and now we're just gonna start coloring the layers with the color. So again, I'm using the Happy Brights. I mostly use, if you wanna start a new palette with the colors we actually use the most in this, I'm gonna delete this. If you wanna delete a color, you just hold and clear. And so the colors of the Happy Brights I'm gonna use most are the lighter pink, the peachy color, the yellow, the green, the dark green we'll use just barely, and then both of the blues. So that's our color palette for this project. You can of course do any color palette you want. All right, so now we're gonna start coloring. So I'm just gonna grab, I've got a heart brush. So I'm gonna go to just a classic monoline brush. I've got a couple in my kit here, just any monoline brush at a fairly large size. And I'm gonna color block. So something I wanna show you that's pretty handy when you're color blocking is this. So say you draw a straight line, hold your finger down, it makes it perfectly straight to the page, and you wanna adjust that line. You can click Edit Line and drag it over and get it nice right up to the edge. See how nice that works for color blocking? And then you're just gonna keep going through and changing colors. Now, when you're doing a project like this where I've already done all the choices for you, it's gonna go much faster, of course, because everything has been predetermined. I only mention that because I want you to know that when I do this on my own time and I'm not teaching a project, it takes me, oh, I didn't click it fast enough. It takes me a lot longer to make these decisions. I play with it endlessly for both the patterns and the colors. And so if a project even simple like this takes you a lot longer, I just want you to know that's completely normal. Some patterns, especially when you're doing an intricate piece like this, it's easy to go from playful and fun to chaotic. And that's subjective, of course, but I try to keep it fun, but not too busy. And also legibility is always king. So you really want to make sure it's readable. All right, so you're just going to go through and do that for the rest of this. And all you're doing is your base color. So, and if you can't tell which is the base color for some of these, that's okay. I can show you on my original real quick what the base colors look like without all the patterns. So I'm gonna duplicate this here, copy it, and I'll bring it over to my new palette so you can see which colors I use. So I'm gonna go up to the top and just paste that in. So those are the colors. So the color on the bottom, I know it can be hard to tell when you have a pattern, is the one I use. So we'll go through that together as we keep going. You can always change it out later. So I want you to pause the video, go through and add all the colors. And then this, our package here, that is this light blue color, ultimately. So just make all your letters match mine. You can see when I did it this time, my spacing is slightly different. That's going to happen every time you do a project. It really does not matter. So again, go ahead and color block all your letters, and then we'll come back and start adding some patterns, and we're going to make a slight adjustment to the size of our gift letter O. So at this point, your piece should look something like this. Now, I decided I wanted my gift letter O to be slightly smaller for no other reason than to be honest, it started as an ornament, so I was trying to leave space for the top of the ornament, but then I decided it just added a little interest to go ahead and make it slightly more square. So I am using my selection tool here. I'm gonna be on freehand, and I'm just gonna circle this. So with the new Apple Pencil, it clicks while I do this. While you're holding it down and circling it, like little haptics kind of vibrate. Now I'm gonna grab the arrow tool, and I'm on uniform, but I wanna be on freeform because I wanna keep the width. I just wanna make it a little shorter. So I'm going to tap the top, make it a bit smaller, and then center it back into place. And so it's just a little bit smaller, and that just makes it a little off. And that is what adds character and playfulness, to just have some little imperfections that make it more fun. All right, so we've got our basic lettering done, and now we're gonna go through and start adding some of the details. So add a new layer, and we're just gonna start here and work our way through each letter. So again, I have done this for you, but when I was planning this, it took a lot of time for me to decide which patterns looked well or looked nice, and then like where to place the simpler things And what I'm really always thinking about is creating balance in a playful way. So again, if you're doing this from scratch, expect it to take you much longer than if you're just sitting following along with this tutorial. In fact, I can open this up and I can go to my wrench icon, canvas, and canvas information and statistics, and I can tell you that this took me about 2 hours and 12 minutes when I did it from scratch. So that might not sound like that long, but for such a simple project, it is kind of a long time. And that's just part of, deciding on colors for me usually is a process, especially with a piece like this when you're trying to find balance, but there is an imperfect number. And then, like we have the light blue here, here, and here, and then I feel like it should be somewhere over here, but we'll kind of deal with that as we add the details in creating that color balance as well. All right, so the first brush I'm gonna use is in my Maximalist kit. And so they're labeled here for you. So I use the X's brush. All right, so this is technically a line brush, but you can use it as a stamp tool as well. So I'm just gonna use a white or almost white color. I'm gonna go full white. And then I don't know how my size is, so let's test one. I'm gonna go right in the middle actually. And then you can always grab your arrow tool and adjust it. And then I'm gonna swipe left, duplicate, bring one about halfway up. Again, I'm just eyeballing things. It does not have to be perfect, and you can always adjust it later. And then you can pinch those layers down, and I'll just rename that X's. All right, on to the next. We'll add more details to that later, but that's usually something I do very last in my process, so I wanna try to keep it the same. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is add some hearts. You can totally just draw a heart. I am gonna use my Modern Folk Art. I decided stamp 6 looks nicest. There's 7 different hearts here. I like the way 6 looks. So I then stamped a heart in the middle. That's too small, so I'm gonna adjust the size with my slider. You could also use your arrow tool. That one's a little too big, so I'm gonna use my arrow tool this time and go with a size I think looks nice. And then we're actually gonna duplicate that and bring it into all 3 centers. And the reason for that is when you are designing certain things, working in odd numbers is appealing to the eye. So that was the reason I did that. I like to keep my layers named because it's helpful when you're gonna come back to them. So you can just tap the layer and rename it if you wish. And then now we're gonna add our first pattern. So this is where it gets a little more interesting. So my color, if I go back to my original project, you can see that I have blue underneath, and then I have a dark blue pattern over the top. So I'm gonna grab my dark blue color, and then I'm gonna go back to my Maximalist kit, and I ultimately decided after a lot of playing around that I liked the window screen look best. All right, so what we need to do is select just that area to apply a pattern to it. So go back to your lettering layer, click your selection tool. Now we're gonna go to automatic, and we want it to grab just that thing. You can see it grabbed too much. So again, just like with the color selection, we can tap it and slide it to reduce the selection threshold. I'm just gonna keep going. All right, so now I'm going to deselect and then try to see if my new, okay, yep, so reducing it gave us just that. So just that is selected, but you don't wanna color on that layer because we wanna be able to edit it if we need to. So we'll go back to our new layer, click our brush tool, and then you can just color right on that layer. And the nice thing about this too is being on its own layer. If I want to adjust this just slightly, let's say I'm on freeform, I'm on my arrow tool, and I am on my right layer. If I wanted to bring this up a little so that it looks the same on both sides, I can manually adjust that, and then I can just turn on, nope, I don't want clipping mask. Clipping mask will only work if it's at the bottom. So if you keep all those layers at the bottom, it'll be okay. And all your detail layers at the top. Otherwise, you can just manually erase the parts that stick off. All right. And again, we're adding so much detail. Those little things are just being nitpicky. You don't necessarily have to be that detailed about it. All right, and then since we did something quite busy here, on the next one, I decided to go back to something basic. So I'm just gonna grab a monoline brush again. Any monoline brush in your kit will do, in your arsenal of brushes. And then I'm gonna go back to white. And I am just going to turn my page because it's helpful to me. And I'm gonna draw a curly Q. I might make it a tiny bit bigger. I'm gonna up my brush size and try that. Yep, I like that. So then I'm just going to, as smoothly as I can, draw a fun curly Q. Usually it will take me a few tries, so if you wanna undo it, 2-finger tap, and then you can have another stab at it. I liked my first one better. All right, it'll usually take me 2 or 3 tries. And then if you get a really wonky piece at the end, you can fix it really simply. Go to your eraser and then just either add or tap in a new base. And then I already knew that I wanted to repeat this to kind of make my O's similar. So what I ended up doing is swiping left, clicking duplicate, tapping my arrow tool, click flip horizontal, and even flip vertical to make it a complete flip. And then I slid it over to that part of my O. Then I can tap and merge down, same thing as pinching layers down, just another option. And then I'm gonna name this curly Q's. All right. Now we're gonna add some pattern to the other part of our, so we wanna come down here. So if you add a layer between a clipping mask and your main lettering, it will automatically apply a new clipping mask. Alternatively, you can just add a new layer and then tap and apply clipping mask. Either way works, just 2 different ways to do it. So this time I'm gonna use the light green. And as you can see on here, I'm using the vertical bold stripes. And again, it tells you what brush kit. So Maximalist kit, I'm gonna use the vertical bold stripes. We do need to use our method again of selection. So I'm gonna come to lettering. Selection tool is again on automatic. I wanna select that blue part. And now I'm on the layer where I wanna add my pattern. And then I can just color it right on. Super easy. All right, so we're gonna keep going with the same process to add the patterns to the rest of our letters. I'm gonna break up the video here just because if the video gets too long, it takes forever to upload to my, or to airdrop to my MacBook Pro. So I'm gonna stop this and start a new one. So we're just gonna keep going with more of the same. So this time we are gonna do the sparkled pattern brush on the yellow part. So again, we wanna grab our lettering and use our selection tool, automatic, and then you can always add a new layer after you select. It doesn't have to be before. And I'm gonna go back to all white, and I'm gonna go to the sparkled brush. And again, I'm just coloring it on. And then we already have our heart on this one. On this one, we're gonna draw some big circles, and then we are gonna make them look like little jingle bells at the end. So I'm gonna come up again to my more like detail work up here, and I'll rename this dots. And I'm just gonna use, again, a basic monoline brush. I'm gonna make it, I want it to be about the same size as those X's, and I'm gonna do the same thing. So I'm gonna make 1 dot, I'm gonna center it, and then I'll duplicate, drag it up, just gonna eyeball where about the center of those are, and then duplicate again and drag one down. And those are a little small. I could make them a little bigger. I might try doing that. Let's max out the size of this brush. I'm gonna add a new layer above. Yeah, I think I wanna make it a little bigger. You could individually increase the size too, but to make sure they're consistent, I'm just gonna do a new one. Right, again, so we're just eyeballing it. Can always edit it later. And now since I deleted that out, I do have to rename it. All right, and now we're gonna add some fun detail work to our package. So let's go ahead and go back to our selection tool, automatic. And this one, we do want to have a clipping mask. So I'm gonna do my dark blue color. I'm gonna leave that same size monoline brush and try this out. So I'm just gonna draw a line, eyeballing that it's the middle, and then hold my finger down so it's nice and straight. Same thing on the other side. That came out pretty good, eyeballing it. So that's part of my package. And then keep it selected, add a new layer below it. So it'll be right there and it'll auto apply the clipping mask. And now we are going to go back to Maximalist and add a wavy lines brush. Okay, so this one has some built-in opacity, and that's fine. You can't even really tell. But if you want it to be more intense, you can always duplicate it. See how it got darker? So if I turn that off and on, it gets darker, but it also darkens the background. So an easy way to get rid of that, if you want to, is you could take your auto selection tool and you can either individually select them or you can select and kind of play with that. Oop, that's selecting too much. Sometimes it'll select in between the lines without taking the lines. You can always select those like this. Grab your arrow tool. You can cut it or just take it off the page. And so that's just that kind of in between details, and that'll just brighten it up. Totally optional, but I wanted to teach you that in case you ever run into needing to do that. We are gonna add a bow to this, but let's do that at the end with our detail work. You can notice I got a little lazy about naming my things here. So if you wanted to rename those wavy lines, we'll call this ribbon since it's our package ribbon. This is our sparkle layer. This was window screen. So I usually like to name them with the name of the brush because that way if I come back to this later, I can remember what brush I used. Bold stripes. I think it's clear that they're horizontal, so I'll leave that part out because we are going to use vertical or horizontal stripes on a different one. But anyhow, that it's a little cleaner and it's just easier to see what you've got on your page if you are consistent about renaming them. All right, so next we have this blue section here, and this is gonna be, we did simple, simple, simple. So we're just kind of, again, creating that balance. This one is going to be the Swiss crosses. So I'm gonna come to the Swiss cross, and again, white on my color palette, and that's actually a pretty good size. So I'm gonna draw one, I'm gonna roughly center it, duplicate, eyeball it. And again, having that snapping and magnetics on is very helpful for keeping things in line quickly. Then I'll pinch my layers together and rename those. I'll just do crosses for simplicity's sake. And then we already have our heart. We are gonna change those a bit once we get to the detail section. We are gonna do another window screen. I tried again all different things, but I decided using too many patterns got a little too busy. So again, we're gonna come down to our lettering. Our selection tool is still on automatic. We want that light pink one. We're gonna add a new layer and we're gonna come back down to window screen and I'm gonna use the bright pink on this one. All right, and once again, if you want to make this so that it ends on a solid line like this part does, you can just manually freeform bring it up. All right, so we have one section left here and we're gonna do some stripes again. So I'll rename that one window screen as well. And our last one. So again, selection tool, new layer. This one's also gonna be stripes. And so this time we're gonna do vertical bold stripes and we're gonna use the deep blue color. All right, So we've made a lot of progress here. In the last section of the video, we're gonna add the cute little bow and some simple detail work to the hearts, as well as some fun stars, and that really helps give us our final product. All right, let's edit our hearts first. So let's go to our hearts layer. For our top heart, we're gonna take the light green and just drag and drop the color. For the middle one, you're gonna make it the brighter pink. And for the bottom one, actually, we're gonna go back to that light green. Now we're gonna duplicate that layer, leave it on top for a second, take the dark green and do the top and bottom hearts, take the light peach and do the middle heart. Now you're gonna drag and drop it, hold it and drag, pencil, sometimes your finger works better, down. And then I'm just going to bring it a tiny bit down to create really simple dimension. And so if you wanted to keep those together, you could always group them. Let's add our little details and then we'll group them together. So add a new layer above your hearts, go all white and then go back to just a little monoline brush, make it nice and small. And then we're just gonna come in here and add some highlights. So I just like to, whoops, I'm on eraser. Do kind of a simple arc and then an arc and a dot and then, whoop, stray mark. On this one, I'll do my dot on this side. And then on this one, I'll go back to this side. So if you zoom in and you can see how there's a white line here. So that means when I was coloring, when I was using drag and drop, my threshold wasn't high enough. All you have to do, so what I did here, if you tap that, you can grab any color and go back to it really easily. So I'll grab that color and then all you have to do, whoops, I'm gonna turn alpha lock on so I can only color on the layer and you can just touch things up. Same thing, you can kind of see that I had this layer pink at one point and then changed it. So as you zoom in, if you notice that stuff, you can just quickly grab the color and correct it. When you zoom out, you won't even notice, but it bothers me if I zoom in and I see it. Same thing with this. You can see that I did have this green at one point and then I changed my mind. So my threshold just needed to be a little higher, but it's really easy to fix manually as well. So you can just come back in with yellow and kind of clean up those edges anywhere that needs it. All right, so let's see what's next. Let's add some, well, actually, let's rename that highlights. And then if you group things, you can just swipe right until everything is blue, click group, and then close that to get it out of your way and rename it hearts. And that just keeps it so you have a lot less layers. We can even do that with our details at a point later. I'll show you that at the end, and then it'll just be cleaner and easier for you to organize. I'm gonna add that down to the bottom there. All right, so let's add some few more details. Add a new layer. Let's just call it details. And I think we can keep all these on one layer. Again, we're just gonna use a small monoline brush. For the first one, I'm going to use the kind of teal green color. I'm just gonna draw a line, hold my finger down to make it nice and straight, and just kind of eyeball some little X's within the X's. And then I want dots at the end of each. So I'm just going to make the brush bigger and then add some little dots. This started because I did the little O's as jingle bells, and then I decided to do it for the X's and crosses as well. And you can see it just makes a fun little extra. All right, so I wanna remember what size I was on for the end of my jingle bells. So I'm going to tap where my brush is and click plus, and that'll remind me that that's the size I use. If you have old ones, you can tap them and remove them. All right, so I keep this one a lot because this is 2% for the brush that I'm using, and it's one I use for a lot of detail work. So that just keeps your lines consistent. They don't even necessarily have to be. I liked them more consistent for this piece. Whoops. So again, I'm doing the exact same thing, just on the pluses this time. And then again, I can go back to where my brush was, thanks to that memory feature, and then tap in the ends of my lines And that kind of reminds me of like a jack kids play with at Christmas. If you have a stray mark there, that's from from either 2-finger tapping or holding down for lines. You can just erase it out. I kind of forget that I can just easily click between things now. And then for my color palette, it might be too sensitive. You can actually adjust the sensitivity too, so that if you accidentally squeeze your pencil too hard or too light, you can adjust those things in settings with the new brush. So that's just something I need to play with a little bit more. All right, so same thing for this one, but we're gonna use the pink color, and I'm gonna go to the small size. Again, draw some little X's. I'm holding my pen down so I get a straight line, but I don't necessarily want it to be perfectly perpendicular or anything, so I'm just gonna go without tapping my finger this time. So just some little X's, and then again, I'll go back to where my brush size is remembered and just tap those in for that kind of Jingle Bell-ish look. All right, so let's next add our stars because it's easy. So add a new layer, rename stars. And again, this is something I played with so many different stars for this. So I went to my Stardust kit. This one is very holiday-ish to me. This is one of my favorites. I feel like this one can be holiday-ish, so can this one. But ultimately, I really liked just the classic star stamp best. So that is what I went with, but you can go with whatever you want. So I added a star here. And when I was doing this, I think this was the very last thing I did, but I just felt like it made it a little festive. And then I used yellow for this one. And again, you can use your selection tool on freehand and your arrow tool to kind of line it up a little better if you need to. All right, so last thing we need to do is to create our little bow. It's a super simple little illustration. I'm going to, it doesn't necessarily need to be down here. We'll just add a new layer at the top and call it bow. And I played with adding texture to this and ultimately decided because there's texture on the package, it looked best without it. So to draw a super simple bow, we are gonna go back to just a classic monoline brush. I'm gonna make it fairly small. I'm gonna draw a shape kind of like that and go ahead and fill it in. As you can see, it does not have to be perfect or pretty. You can drag and drop the color. Maybe once you add the color, smooth out a line if you need to. And then we're just going to swipe left, duplicate, arrow tool, flip horizontal, bring it to the other side. And then you can merge that down. And now I'm gonna create a bow center. I'm gonna use that lighter pink color and I'm just gonna draw an oval. And if I hold this down, quick shape in Procreate will make a nice oval for me. I'm gonna make it pretty big. And you can always adjust it. If you turn snapping and magnetics off, you have a little more control over rotating it. Otherwise it'll snap to certain lines. So sometimes I'll play with turning that off and on. All right, and then I'm gonna add a new layer just below here. And I'm gonna go for the bow tails. And I just kind of drew something like this. Again, fill it in, duplicate, arrow tool, flip horizontal. And I'm gonna make that one a little off so they're not perfect, a little wonky. I know you can't see any definition now, but we'll fix that. Right now, in fact, we can name these bow tails. So duplicate your bow, click the bottom one, go to your magic wand, click hue, saturation, brightness, and go all the way down. And now we're just gonna tap a tiny shadow, and I'm gonna tap my magic wand again, Gaussian blur, make it a little blurry, and then I'm gonna tap my N on that layer and reduce the opacity so it's nice and light. So it's about 14% there, and even though it's simple, you can still see it. All right, and then we're gonna add some little details to this as our final step. So I'm gonna add a new layer and do it as a clipping mask for a second, but then I can always move it down. All right, so I'm gonna use, I think, the same pink, and I'm just gonna draw kind of an arc shape up here on both sides, just to give the bow a little dimension. And if you want it to be slightly darker than your center, a super easy way to do that, again, is come back to hue, saturation, brightness, and then just take it down by like even 2 or 3%, and it'll just add a little more depth. And then I also want to add in just some simple lines. All right, and there you have it. We have a cute little bow. And if you want to, that's our bow center. We forgot to rename that. I guess I'll leave my details separate just in case I want to edit them or change the colors of this piece later. And then again, I would swipe right on all those to highlight them, group them, and rename that bow. You could really do the same thing with your textures and your details if you wanted to condense it down even further. I am happy with leaving it as is. I did play with adding some extra stars and dots around it, and I didn't hate it, but it's so busy as is. I felt like it stood on its own without adding extra details. If you're familiar with my work, I like to add a lot of extraneous details and marks. So if you are done with this and you wanted to, let's say, send it to your computer to print holiday cards, what I would recommend doing is coming down, turning your background color off, clicking the wrench icon, clicking share, and then exporting it as a PNG file, either to your computer or phone, wherever you want to share it. I usually airdrop it to my MacBook, and then that's where I open it in, say, Photoshop and create my mockups. Like that. You could actually bring a picture into Procreate and then just lay it right on top here as well. And then this I usually design in Illustrator. So I mock it up, again, just using that PNG file for everything. All right, so that is it for this project. It is somewhat similar to a project I did years ago called quilted lettering, but that one's a little more doodle based and using a different brush kit. This one has more patterns, and it is of course holiday, but I named this Patterned Colorblock so that it would be something you could do year round. You could pick a totally different word or phrase and do the same thing and have it not be festive. You could also use more traditional holiday colors for this. I love a merry and bright theme, so I tend to use a lot of bright colors in my holiday projects, but the possibilities are quite endless. You again could use way different brushes and patterns than I did. But I look forward to seeing what you create. Tag me on Instagram at @ByDawnNicole, and I will see you back in a few weeks. I'm gonna try to do 1 to 2 projects a week throughout 2026 that teaches you projects like these. They're fun, they're simple, and they really teach you how to use my brush sets and or lettering styles and whatnot. And I think you'll learn a lot of Procreate tips and tricks and kind of my somewhat organized, chaotic workflow along the way.